I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
If you remember before, we have done Atheists Watch Jesus Camp and Atheists Watch God is Not Dead. And actually, Atheists Watch Jesus Camp is one of our most popular videos of all time.
I get it. We're amazing. But, so now we're doing Kidnapped for Christ.
Which was actually our #1 recommended video that we do next after those two. So, here we are today, caving in and watching it.
Yep. So, kind of a synopsis of this. If you were to take Jesus Camp and then take the kids from Jesus Camp and then take them against their will and then go to, like, the Dominican Republic and then make them do all the Jesus Camp stuff and then also maybe slap them around a little bit, that's this movie.
So, while Jesus Camp is upsetting,
Yep.
this one is just messed up. Yep. This is so messed up, but I guess that's why we're watching it for you. So let's dive right in to Kidnapped for Christ. So the film begins, and we have friends and friends of the family of our, let's call him our main character, David, talking about their experience when David basically went missing. Because, as we said, the premise of this is, these people are kidnapped without prior knowledge that it's going to happen and taking out of the country. So obviously their friends aren't going to know that this is going to happen, so they didn't really know what happened to David at first.
It was kind of a shock because we weren't sure where he was, what he was doing, why he wasn't returning any of our calls. And when it came around to school beginning and he wasn't there, that's when we kind of realized that something might not be right.
We're going to follow David and some tertiary characters, mostly girls Beth and Ty. And they're going to tell us this story, and it's going to be the same story over and over.
One morning I woke up, 2 guys were at my house.
They were woken up at 6 o'clock in the morning with escorts telling them, they had 5 minutes to leave. And they're like, no, you have no choice. You can do this the easy way or the hard way.
We went through the airport, they dragging me with a belt the entire time, flew down to Miami, and then I finally figured out where we were going.
I don't know how TSA agents work.
Yeah.
I'm not one. But wouldn't you think, like, hey, isn't that kid being literally taken against his will to a foreign country?
Yeah, well...
Should we stop it?
No, it's okay, they're white.
Oh, yeah.
And then we get our first interview with David, which clearly happens about 6 weeks after he is into the camp, because that's when our documentary crew got there. And he basically says, I don't know what's happening, but I just gotta put my trust in God. And the reason that he's here is presumably because he came out to his parents as gay.
Yep.
And now they're having conflict because they do not accept his lifestyle. They do not accept the fact that he is gay, and they get into arguments about it.
And we also meet the 2 other characters, Beth and Ty. Beth seems to be here because she has panic attacks. Because of that, has kind of behavioral issues. Okay, so let's make Jesus take care of what obviously a medical professional and a psychiatrist should be. But that's fine. And then Ty, she says her issues where she was like rebelling and like doing drugs, stuff that high schoolers do normally.
I'd also like to point out that the girl with panic attacks, I don't know the reasoning, but, kidnapping someone in the middle of the night and taking them to the Dominican Republic, probably not the best thing to help with panic attacks.
Probably not at all. Before we really get into the nitty-gritty of the film, the actual person who is doing the project, her name is Kate Logan, she basically is talking about, what she expects, and she tells a little background of herself. Actually, she is an evangelical that, quote, came from a family filled with liberals, so I assume she means non-religious.
Yeah, so she actually comes from an evangelical university, and she's a film student there, and she heard about this school, Escuela Caribe, which is in the Dominican Republic, as we said, and she's going to go there just because she's interested in it. If you remember back to our Jesus Camp review, there was sort of another Christian character who was supposed to be juxtaposed with the other extreme evangelical Christians. She's basically that character. She's the more reasonable Christian in this who is juxtaposing the more fanatical Christians who, kidnap the kids.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see her journey as well over the years of dealing with this camp and trying to get more information.
And then we meet the very tan blonde guy who clearly loves Jesus, David Weir, and he's kind of like the, we'll call him the head camp counselor. Yeah. He seems like he's the one in charge.
He's always I don't know if he's administratively in charge, but he's certainly always giving the sermons when they cut to the church.
He says that basically all the kids here are here to straighten their life out. I gotta be honest, during the course of this film, I didn't see very many examples of kids that were really fucked up. No. Except through their experience here. Like, they seem pretty level-headed. The girl with the panic attacks has obviously some mental issues, but it's not, panic attacks aren't like schizophrenia. She's just got a little issue of anxiety. But when you could see them as they go on, it starts to get a little more severe. So, I mean, I don't think it's helping.
What's interesting to me, too, is how long it seems they're keeping these kids here. This isn't like a summer camp where you're there for a couple weeks or a month. Some of these kids have been here for over a year.
Beth, the one with panic attacks, had been there for over a year by the time they got there, and that was 6 weeks after David got there. So, we meet Deb Hatland. Not looking too hot. I don't think Dominican Republic weather is good for her or her hair.
I'm surprised she's as pale as she is for living in the Dominican Republic.
She stays inside a lot. She gets sweats.
I guess.
She reminds me a lot of Becky Fisher from Jesus Camp.
She seems like Becky's toned-down sister who's not quite as fervent, but she's just as crazy underneath.
Yeah, so yeah, she basically explains the history of the school and its founder, and she has the worst quote that's very revealing. Take a kid out of their environment, and you gain control.
Which is the biggest reason why the school is located in the Dominican Republic. You're taking kids out of their element, and I'm just not extrapolating this. They say this directly. They're trying to take these kids away from the people and the places they know and make them uncomfortable in a new, strange place.
Right, and they call it culture shock, but really what you're doing is you're changing the mental state of the person. You're shocking them into conformity at varying levels of resistance, but I mean, at some point, they're so disassociated and disillusioned with the entire thing, they're gonna break down.
If you know anything about, like, Jonestown, or any cult, really, one of the basic parts of brainwashing is taking people away from their family and friends and the places that they're aware of and putting them in this new environment where you can be in charge of them and they can become dependent upon you.
Yeah, and it has almost everything to do with not allowing them to get evidence to the contrary of what you're doing, being good or virtuous.
Also, they say that they record every phone call that they make out or in from their parents, or I assume...
And they screen the mail.
Yeah, and they said at least for a while when they start there, they look at all the letters. So if I were a parent, I'd be pretty concerned that I couldn't just talk to my kid, but I guess I wouldn't send my kid to this place in the first place.
Yeah.
So.
And actually, it's a kind of a hefty price. The tuition there yearly is $72,000.
So you have to be that kind of rich evangelical Christian that wants to pray the gay away or think your kid's just... You don't understand your kids, so you don't want to deal with them. And again, this is the type of film that... I want to say, of course, this isn't representative of all Christians, or even most Christians. It's a minority, but it is important because this is the sort of minority that does have a voice in politics, especially with the right wing.
So now we're at this kind of, we'll call it a powwow / poetry jam. And right before, David is kind of talking again to the camera, and he's basically like, yeah, I feel like I'm here because I'm gay. My mom basically said she could never love a gay son. And one of his friends, whose name is Matt, and his face is blurred throughout the film because he's only on for a very short time, he's about to leave and he's giving a speech. He's talking about his life, and he talks about how many push-ups he was made to do while he was here, which is a form of discipline. As Matt's leaving, David asks him, hey, can you take this letter home to my family or to my friends? Because I just want to communicate to them. Because keep in mind, they are not allowed to communicate with anyone other than like the people who sent them there.
Yeah,
which is horrifying.
Yeah, but somehow this gets out to the camp counselors. I'll call them camp counselors. It's not really considered a camp, so I don't know what else to call them. So he then gets taken down from a level 2 to a level 0, and it's at this point that they decide to explain the levels to us, the audience. The levels decide how many privileges you have as a person there, and I say privileges, but really it's, are you allowed to go to the bathroom without asking? Are you allowed to enter any room without asking?
Quite literally, there's a girl, Beth again, who throughout the entire film is kept at around a level 0, and she has to ask permission to go in and out of different rooms, to eat, to sit down, to start her punishments, to end her punishments. It's very wild, and they continually reference these people as 0 levelers. You get points on, like, it's basically like a report card, and they do it, I think it was weekly, and you kind of get points and you talk about it, and until you're like level 3 to 4, you really have no rights there. But what they consider a level 3 to 4 is, quote, disillusionment of their past lifestyle. So basically, you forgot you used to be a person.
Yeah, they're just saying, we're gonna break down everything that used to be you, and once you do, good job, you can go to the bathroom without asking.
Yay!
Which, again, brainwashing involves making you dependent upon the people who are your captors, I'll call them.
Yeah.
And that's basically what they're doing with this.
And for those people that think, no, this isn't brainwashing, just remember, there's a scene in this movie where they chant mantras at the dinner table, just like the Founding Fathers intended.
Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world.
At this point, we get more of a voiceover from the director, the filmmaker, the film student, and she's basically saying she's starting to see things that really kind of weird her out, and she doesn't consider normal for this facility. So, for instance, she sees this one girl, and she's filming her, and she says, she's been standing there for over an hour. They've just made her stand here. I don't know what's going on with this. And she begins to kind of start seeing through the cracks in this facility and the weird things that are making these kids do.
Yeah. One of the weird things is they treat it very much like a military barracks, and they make them, like, line their shoes up, make sure your laces aren't, like, tied together and they're tucked into your shoes, and make sure your pants are good and your personal area is all taken care of, which is all good and well until you're a fucking lunatic about it. I mean, these people are taking shoes and confiscating them because they're not tied correctly. What if they ran out of shoes? What if they're just not getting it? Do they go around barefoot? I don't know how it works. I assume because the cameras were there, they're being lax.
Yeah, that's what weirds me out the most.
That way.
This is how these leaders are behaving, knowing they're being filmed. It concerns me as to how are they behaving when the cameras aren't there.
And actually, they're asked pretty point blank, like, hey, is there any abuse that goes on here? And every single person, back to back to back, says, well, yeah.
They say, yeah, stuff's happened in the past and stuff is going to happen in the future, but...
Is that right? I don't know.
Like, no, it's not. And they're not concerned at all. They don't mention any attempt to try and quell abuse, any oversight, any discipline for abuse. They just say it's gonna happen. It happens. It's not our mission statement, though, but, it doesn't matter. The abuse is happening. It's on you. Can you imagine any organization that's based out of the United States abusing children continually and being allowed to do so?
It happens.
But usually when it happens, there's some sort of media firestorm, let's say, and that place gets shut down or there is some investigation.
Yeah.
Here, none of that happens because it's based out of the Dominican Republic. So we get more voiceover from the creator of the film, and she's even starting to get more weirded out. And she's an evangelical Christian, remember? So when you start freaking out the evangelical Christian with how crazy you're getting with your religion, you kinda know you're probably going overboard.
So we revisit Beth. And she has been doing well as of late, and then she gets bumped back down to a level 0 because she has a panic attack. This seems entirely counterproductive. She is prone to panic attacks. Don't you want to, help her through it? No, we will put you back down until you no longer panic. But now her punishments, she starts to go through all the different punishments. This is really the first time you start hearing in depth. They include push-ups, running, and they come in 6s. Usually 6 hours manual labor, or the one that made both Hugo and I pretty upset was they call them SWATs. You get 6 of them per infraction. What a SWAT is you know those paddles that Skull and Bones will use to initiate you into their cult?
Yeah.
It's like that.
And they said they either use a paddle or a leather strap. Which, say what you will about spanking, when you start using outside instruments, it becomes abuse.
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone's ever held a wooden paddle before. Those would hurt like hell.
They're sturdy.
Yeah, and frankly, almost every single one of the counselors, air quotes, are male. And one of the guys has kind of like a broken arm, which I can only assume came from over-abuse of students.
But yeah, that's one thing that we do need to bring up is that I only saw in the entire movie one female leader. All of them are male, and all seem very prone to abusing their power. Yeah. They all, you see their actions and you hear how they talk about it. I don't know how to put it other than they come off like people who abuse their power every chance they get.
Yep.
And these males in their 20s, who are in charge of these young women in their teens, it weirds me out, and it makes me feel like there's probably some terrible abuse going on behind the scenes that we might not see. I could be wrong, but the history of males being in charge in a religious environment like this, especially males in their mid-20s and these young girls, it doesn't seem like the track record is in their favor.
After we get a list of kind of the abuses and, quote, disciplines these kids go through, we meet a former employee. Her name is Mary Powell, and she used to work at the place we're talking about, Escuela Caribe, and she feels so much remorse for the shit that she saw, did, and heard. She was one of the few female counselors, and she said she legit heard extreme abuse happen in what they call the QR, which is a quiet room.
Yeah, and the quiet room is basically this shed where if you have an infraction of some sort, one of the punishments is going to the quiet room, which is an empty room with just a very thin mattress. I wouldn't even call it a mattress. It's more like a cot on the floor.
Like a pad.
And there's a bucket in the corner with a roll of toilet paper, which you can guess what that's for. And you have to sit there alone for a determined amount of time.
And it seems like it's actually kind of an extended... It's not like half an hour in the quiet room. It's like days.
Yeah. And she says this is where a lot of the abuse took place. A counselor or counselors would go in there and kind of rough up one of the people and then leave them there.
Yeah. And she uses words like, I could hear 3 or 4 counselors go in and, quote, toss around the small child. A little bit after that, we kind of move to the girls' dinner table, and they're kind of standing around. And they're just standing there, and the head guy there says, Beth, I need you to do 3 squats right now. Kind of just arbitrarily, like, now you're in trouble. Time to do that. And she's like, okay, can I start? And he ignores her for a little bit. Yeah. And then he kind of carries on a conversation. And then's like, okay, you may begin. She does it, and then she has to ask to get back up. And it's borderline for no reason.
And this is where I'm getting the fact that these guys are getting off on the power almost. Yeah. It's not just a disciplinary thing. These guys are doing this to feel in control. It's really messed up. It's not like she did anything. He was just like, I'm going to exert my power over you and show you that I can make you do whatever I want you to do. We get another interview with David at the camp, and he's talking about the fact that he feels the reason he's here is he is gay. He says to the effect of, I think my parents put me here because they were embarrassed of me. They just didn't want me around in their lives right now. After that, David goes to a counselor and talks to him about that, one of the guys who seems like a sociopath, as we mentioned before. Yeah. David also feels that he's not really in with the camp yet. He doesn't feel like he can trust it. He says this to the counselor, I really feel like I need to trust this program and this camp, and I don't yet. And the counselor says, well, maybe we're not being clear with you on our instructions, so I'll try and be black and white with you in the future. As far as, all this personal stuff, I don't really want to deal with this garbage, so get in your room. Puts him in his room, locks the door, puts an alarm on his door.
Yeah.
So that, I'm sure, really helped David with his trust issues as far as the camp goes.
So we shoot back to the States, and we're talking to people in David's social circle. There's a few people from his neighborhood, his drama teacher, some friends from high school, and we start learning that they're trying to figure out ways to communicate with David because his note got through.
Yeah, the filmmaker actually went back to the States after her time there, and as her time went there, they actually gave her less and less access to the camp because they started to see she wasn't exactly on board with their methods, so she slowly over time got squeezed out. David was able to give her a note to give to one of his friends back in the States. She gets back to the States, she gets in contact with the girl, gives her the note, and she reads it on camera, and David basically says, please help me get out of here. I'm turning 18 in a couple months. I don't want to be here anymore. They're physically abusing us. And she's shocked. She's shocked at what's happening. And by the way, he is turning 18 in a couple months, but according to this camp, even when you turn 18, you cannot leave. We can make you stay. I don't think that's legally true, but it is what the camp is telling these kids.
I don't think it's legally true either, but 2 of the male adults are basically taking legal action. They're calling the American consulate, and they're trying to get some sort of, maybe not, loophole might be a wrong word, but some sort of government action to legally take him back to the States. So now they're at least taking action to try to get David out.
Yeah. So 2 of the people who were trying to get David home, his neighbor and a family friend, they fly to the camp in the Dominican Republic. They've raised money, and they've actually gotten a judge to get this writ of Habeas Corpus, is what they call it.
Yeah.
And it says basically, you're detaining this kid against his will. It's his 18th birthday. They go on his 18th birthday, and you need to let him go. They don't let him go, and they actually say he's not even there.
Yeah, which is clearly a lie. Where is he gonna be?
So they actually have to go back to the United States without David, which is unfortunate. And then it actually cuts forward several months, and it turns out David has returned to the United States.
They're like, oh, excited, and the director finds out and is like, oh, I'm going to go meet David at the Starbucks. And they take his best friend, who's very excited to see him, as you can imagine. And they walk in, and then the Starbucks person's like, okay, don't film in here. And they're like, okay, but they keep the camera running for a second. And you can hear David's voice. He's like, hey, I don't know if I can talk to you. Like, you gotta go. And you're like, holy shit, what?
And then it cuts to back in the car, and the best friend is crying, and she really doesn't understand what's happened. She doesn't know if David's been lied to or what's happening. But later we find out the context of that, so we'll explain that as it comes.
And now cut forward. It's a couple years later. The director of the film has finished school, and she had actually been told by lawyers that she wasn't allowed to finish the film by David's parents and by the school itself. So she's like, okay, I'll just let it calm down. But then she's like, you know what, I'm going to go talk to a couple of the people I met there. And she goes and she finds Beth. Beth apparently has a kid now. I don't know if it's her kid. They said it was only like 3 or 4 years later.
It seemed like later than that.
The kid seemed older than that, though. You know what I mean?
Oh, maybe. I think it seemed like more than 3 or 4 years.
Either way, she's caring for a child. She seems totally brainwashed. She was there for 17 months. She said she got a lot of abuse. She got a lot of this. But she says, I feel like I deserved it. I feel like this place saved my life.
Which is really sad because, I mean, she was mentally abused hard.
Absolutely.
I mean, if she's found peace in her life, great for her. But man, that is sad that all had to happen. Then we get the opposing opinion from Ty, who has come out of this and has said, no, this was bullshit. This is absolutely uncalled for. I can't believe they did this. That was abuse, and she says she still has nightmares about it sometimes.
Yeah. She says she coughed blood more than one time from all the running, and she doesn't say really how long she was there, so I guess I don't know how long she was there, but it seems like around a year because of the amount of time that she talks about in that context. She says she's really angry, and it's mostly about the abuse, and basically is like, fuck that place.
Yeah. We get some more voiceover from the creator of the film, and she says, I finally was able to get in touch with David, and, it's been several years. He finally got in contact with me, and then we get another interview with David. He's older now, obviously. He says to the effect of, my parents basically told me it would be very bad if I talked to you years ago when you wanted to talk and when I first came back. But now I've realized that's a bunch of bullshit. They were lying to me. Yeah. So now I feel comfortable talking to you, and I want people to hear my story so this doesn't happen to others.
And they actually get the best friend and the 2 guys that actually went down to get him, the ones that failed.
He talks to them a little bit about the abuse. He talks about what he's been up to in the years since. He's moved on with his life. He talks to the best friend and apologizes and explains why he didn't want to talk to her at the time. He was just afraid. Because, again, the camp was kind of abusing him. He was afraid stuff was going to happen.
And he actually thought that he might get in some legal trouble because of his dad's lawyer and all that.
And they talk a little bit about their religion, actually. And all of them seem to have gone through this change of their opinion of their own religion in the intervening time because of their experience with this camp. The creator of the movie, she's evangelical at the beginning. I think she still is at the end, but she says she has definitely changed her opinion on Christianity. She sees it as different. I think she sees more the bad elements of it. She sees that there are good and bad, and she doesn't consider the whole thing just one big ball of goodness like she did before.
Yeah.
So she sees more shades of gray, for sure.
But David was very interesting.
David says he no longer considers himself Christian because of what Christianity has become. I'd assume he's still religious in the sense that he believes in a God, but he certainly doesn't consider himself religious, which is really interesting. I wonder if these institutions even know that they have that effect on a lot of people, that they actually drive people away from their religion and make people think badly of it, which is sad. I mean, obviously I'm an atheist, and I don't really advocate for religion in any way, shape, or form.
Neither do I.
But the fact is, if you're trying to advocate for something and you're driving people away from it, you're doing a bad thing.
Yeah, you're doing very poorly.
So David had asked, what does he believe in now? And David has a very poignant ending line where he says, now I believe in love. And that's a good way to end his portion of the film. And the movie ends, it shows some montages of him going to this convention where it's people who are victims of institutional abuse. So it's people who went to other camps like this, or probably from schools or churches, basically any institution where people are being abused. Yeah. And it's a conference for them, and they talk about what can be done about it, and they say there are so many of these places around the country, and they show a map, and they're just all over the country.
They're in just about every state, and they're overseas. Most of them around the whole entire world, United States.
Obviously.
Which makes sense. We have a lot of evangelical Christians. We have a lot of extremely conservative people. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And then the film ends, and we get some final messages, basically to the extent of, in 2012, the camp in the Dominican Republic was actually closed, but they do say a new camp kind of opened there, and I don't know much about this new camp, but it did open, and it's a similar facility that is used to treat, quote-unquote, troubled teens.
What it seems like is like, okay, we're done. They changed it, and then changed the name around for PR purposes, because they knew this film was coming out.
Yeah.
It really, really does not seem like the practices are going to change. Now, I don't know that to be a fact. I could be entirely wrong, but the way that went down seems like pretty much a name swap.
Yeah. So that's Kidnapped for Christ. And again, at the end of the film, we get some more stuff. They link to their website, and they say there's this bill that needs to be passed. It's this bill that's to protect children in these sort of institutions, because these places have no government oversight. So all this stuff can happen in them, and no one's there to stop it.
And it's been proposed 4 times and not been picked up and voted in? How the fuck can you be in charge of a governmental institution and be like, you know those kids that are getting beaten? I'm all for it.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. Actually, after I saw this film, right after I went to their website and sent a message to my congressperson about it, and I looked at the website, because it's a website that deals with a lot of various petitions and letters you can write to. And this particular bill, 87% it said people were in favor of this bill, but apparently there's 13% of people who sent letters to their representatives to the effect of, fuck this bill, fuck these kids.
Yeah, I don't get it. I will assume they think that the institutions are doing a good thing.
I think it's either...
I can't imagine it's as opposed to the abuse as more of for the institution. But
I think it's that. I think it's people who are for the institutions, probably evangelicals who are tied to them in some way, or it's people who are staunchly conservative and think spending any amount of money on any program, even if it might be beneficial, is a bad thing.
I don't know. But there's links to that if you've seen this film and you want to be part of that, or you're part of that 13% that shouldn't be watching our channel.
I definitely recommend you go to this website. There's direct links, and there's even a form letter if you want to send that to your representatives, because I do think it's an important thing that should get done.
I entirely endorse watching this film.
Yeah, it's a really good movie, and it upsets you on a lot of levels, but it is very informative, and you need to pay attention to things like this in the world. You just do, whether it be religious or not.
Yeah.
The abuses this place is putting on people are ridiculous.
Absolutely.
So the film itself, I give this film 9 dead of night kidnappings out of 10.
And I give this film 9 pray the gays away.
Yeah. It's a good movie.
It's a really, really good movie.
If you find a chance to watch it, definitely do so. If any of you have any suggestions for movies for us to do in the future, leave those in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
You can always follow us on Twitter at Hugo Reloaded.
Or you can follow me at Bible Reloaded. I am so much cooler than him.
You can donate to us on Patreon. There's a link to that. Other than that, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this has been The Bible Reloaded.